The ship was dying around him. And Sergeant Marcus Cole knew he would die with I. Pressed his back against the cold metal wall of the cargo bay and listened to the sounds of destruction above him, the screaming of twisted steel, the hiss of escaping atmosphere, the distant thunder of alien weapons tearing through what remained of the research vessel Horizon's Edge 3 hours ago. This ship had been his home 3 hours ago. 47 people had lived and worked and laughed within these walls. Now Marcus was alone. He could still smell the smoke from the bridge where Captain Torres had died at her station, refusing to abandon her crew. Even as the first Voldari boarding pods punched through the hull, he could still hear the echoes of Dr. Chun's last words over the intercom, warning everyone to run, to hide, to survive, but there was nowhere to run in the black void of space. And the Voldari did not leave survivors. Marcus had read the intelligence reports. Back on Earth, the Voldari were conquerors who had swept across 3 star systems in the past decade, enslaving every species they encountered. They stood 7 feet tall, covered in natural armor that could stop a bullet, and they moved with the perfect coordination of a hive mind. Linked to their queen, no species had ever successfully resisted them. No individual had ever escaped their grasp, and now their ships surrounded the crippled Horizon's Edge like wolves. Circling a wounded Dia, Marcus checked his weapons one more time. He had a plasma pistol with exactly 14 shots remaining. He had a combat knife with a 7-inch blade that his father had given him before he shipped out, and he had a length of steel pipe that he had pulled from a broken support beam. It was not much. Against an army, it was not much. Against even one Voldari soldier, but it was what he had. And Marcus Cole had never been the type of man to give up simply because the odds were bad. He thought about his sister back on Earth, probably sitting in her apartment in Chicago right now, completely unaware that her brother was about to die millions of miles away. He thought about his mother, who had cried when he told her he was joining the deep space program, who had begged him to stay safe. He thought about all the things he would never do, all the places he would never see, all the words he would never say, and then he pushed those thoughts aside because they would not help him now. The only thing that would help him now was focus. The only thing that would help him now was the cold, hard determination that had carried him through boot camp, through his first combat deployment, through every difficult moment of his 32 years of life. The Voldari expected to find frightened prey hiding in the wreckage of this ship. They expected to find weak creatures ready to submit, ready to be collared and chained and broken. They did not know what a human being was capable of when pushed to the edge. They were about to learn. The sound of the airlock cycling echoed through the cargo bay like a death knell. Marcus took a deep breath and moved silently behind a stack of supply crates, positioning himself where he could see the main entrance without being seen. The airlock door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, and the Voldari poured through like a flood of chitinous nightmares. They were even more terrifying in person than the intelligence photos had suggested. Their bodies were covered in plates of natural armor that gleamed like polished obsidian under the emergency lights. Their faces were a mass of mandibles and compound eyes that reflected the red glow of the warning sirens. They moved with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for creatures of their size, their forearms holding weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Marcus counted 12 soldiers in the first wave, with more shadows moving in the corridor behind them. 12 against 1. Those were not good odds, but Marcus had never cared much about odds. The lead Voldari soldier clicked and chittered something in its alien language, gesturing for its squad to spread out and search the cargo bay. They expected to find corpses. They expected to find cowering survivors ready for capture. They did not expect the human who stepped out of the shadows with a plasma pistol raised and a smile on his bloodied face. Marcus fired 3 times before they could even react. The first shot took the lead soldier in the throat, finding the gap between its head and chest armor. The second shot hit another soldier in its compound eyes, sending it crashing backward into its companions. The third shot went wide as Marcus was already moving, diving behind another stack of crates as return fire scorched the air where he had been standing. The Valdari screamed, not in fear, but in something like confusion. Their hive mind had processed thousands of conquest scenarios they had encountered, hundreds of species across dozens of worlds. None of them had ever attacked first. None of them had ever smiled while doing it. Marcus rolled to a new position and fired twice more, dropping another soldier before it could bring its weapon to bear. Cargo Bay erupted into chaos as the Valdari tried to coordinate, their movements becoming jerky and uncertain as they struggled to adapt to a threat they had never anticipated. Marcus used their confusion like a weapon, moved through the maze of cargo containers like a ghost, appearing for just a moment to fire a shot or slash with his knife before vanishing again into the shadows. Did not fight like their previous conquests, who had either fled or surrendered or stood paralyzed with fear. Fought like something they had never encountered before. He fought like a predator. Another Valdari fell with a knife buried in the gap beneath its arm. Another crumpled as Marcus brought the steel pipe down on the back of its head with all the strength in his body. The survivors regrouped, clicking frantically to each other, trying to coordinate a response to this impossible human who would not stop, who would not run, who would not break. But Marcus was not finished. He had 11 shots left in his pistol, had a knife slick with alien blood, and he had something the Valdari would never understand, something that burned in his chest like a star, hot and bright and absolutely unquenchable. He had the fury of a man with nothing left to lose. The battle in the cargo bay was only the beginning. The Valdari had come expecting easy prey. They had found something else entirely, and somewhere far away on the massive flagship that commanded this fleet, a queen was about to receive a report that would change everything she thought she knew about the universe. The corridors of the horizon's edge became a hunting ground, and Marcus Cole became the hunter. He moved through the damaged ship like a shadow, using every trick he had learned in 10 years of military service to stay one step ahead of the Valdari soldiers, who now filled every passage and every room. They outnumbered him 50-1. They had superior weapons, superior armor, and the perfect coordination of their hive mind. But Marcus had something they could not understand and could not predict. He had chaos. The Valdari fought as a single organism, each soldier linked to the others through some psychic connection that allowed them to move and attack in perfect harmony. When one saw something, they all saw it. When one thought something, they all knew it. This made them devastating against enemies who fought in organized groups, who moved in predictable patterns, who could be outmaneuvered through superior coordination. But Marcus was not a group. Marcus was a single man fighting with nothing but instinct and rage, making decisions in the space between heartbeats, changing direction without warning or reason. Every time the Valdari thought they had him cornered, he was already somewhere else. Every time they tried to predict his next move, he did something completely unexpected. He crawled through ventilation shafts too small for their armored bodies to follow. He doubled back through rooms they had already cleared. He set traps, using the ship's damaged systems, overloading power conduits to create explosions, venting atmosphere to create pressure waves, using the emergency doors as weapons to crush soldiers who got too close. His plasma pistol ran dry after the first hour, so he took weapons from the soldiers he killed. When those weapons ran dry, He used his knife. When his knife broke against Voldari armor, he used his hands, his feet, his teeth. Anything he could turn into a weapon. The soldiers began to report something strange to their commanders. The human was wounded. They could see the blood trailing behind him as he moved through the ship. The human was exhausted. They could hear his ragged breathing echoing through the corridors, but the human was still fighting. The human was still killing, and most disturbing of all, the human was smiling. They had seen many expressions on the faces of their prey over the centuries of conquest. They had seen fear, which was expected. They had seen despair, which was natural. They had seen resignation, which was logical, but they had never seen a creature smile while fighting impossible odds, while bleeding from a dozen wounds, while facing certain death. The smile confused them more than any weapon could have. It suggested something their hive mind could not process, that this human was not fighting to survive. He was fighting because fighting itself meant something. To him, he was fighting because the act of resistance had value beyond its practical results. This was a concept so alien to the Voldari that it might as well have been Magic Commander Vethrak, the senior officer leading the boarding operation, finally managed to corner Marcus in the ship's medical bay. After 3 hours of hunting, 20 soldiers surrounded the room, their weapons trained on every entrance and exit. There was no escape this time, no ventilation shafts, no emergency doors, no tricks left to play. Marcus stood in the center of the room, swaying on his feet, covered in blood, both red and black. He had a broken chair leg in one hand and a surgical scalpel in the other. Vethrak clicked his mandibles in what passed for Voldari laughter. "You have fought well, small creature," he said in broken but understandable human language. The Voldari had learned many languages during their conquests. "But your fight is over now." Marcus looked at the 20 soldiers surrounding him, then back at the commander. "Is it?" he asked, and his voice was rough and tired, but still somehow defiant. "Because I count 20 of you, and I have killed more than that already tonight. You are wounded," Vethrak observed. "You are unarmed except for primitive tools. And you are alone. I have been alone since your ships killed everyone I cared about on this vessel," Marcus replied. "Being alone is not new to me. Surrender," the commander said. "Surrender, and you will live as a slave rather than die as a fool." Marcus laughed, a harsh, broken sound that echoed off the medical bay walls. "You really do not understand humans at all, do you?" He raised his makeshift weapons and took a step forward. The soldiers tensed, ready to fire. But Vethrak held up a hand to stop them. "Explain," the commander said, genuinely curious despite himself. "Explain why you continue to fight when logic dictates surrender." "Because surrender is not victory," Marcus said. "And death in battle is not defeat. Those words have no meaning. They have all the meaning in the world," Marcus replied. "Every second I keep fighting, I am winning because you have not beaten me yet. And every soldier I take with me is a victory because they will never hurt anyone else. And even when you finally kill me, you will remember that one human made you bleed for every inch of this ship." He smiled again. That terrible, confusing smile. "That is what we are," he continued. "That is what humanity is. We do not calculate odds. We do not measure victory in simple numbers. And we do not surrender just because winning seems impossible." Vethrak stared at this strange, bleeding creature and felt something he had not felt in 200 years of conquest. He felt uncertain. "Kill him," he finally ordered his soldiers. "Kill him now before," but Marcus was already moving, hurling himself at the nearest soldier with a scream that seemed to shake the walls. And the medical bay exploded into violence one final time. The fight lasted less than a minute. When it was over, Marcus lay on the floor, broken and barely breathing, surrounded by the bodies of 6 more Valdara soldiers he had taken with him. Vethrak looked down at the human, and felt that uncertainty grow into something larger. "Do not kill him," he ordered his remaining soldiers. "Stabilize him and keep him alive, because the Queen will want to see this one." He turned and walked out of the medical bay, already composing the report he would send to the flagship. High Queen Celiara Vethani had commanded every Valdari conquest for 3 centuries. She had seen 1,000 species break and bend and submit, but she had never seen anything like this. Human and Vethrak suspected that when she did see him, everything would change. High Queen Celiara Vethani had ruled the Valdari dominion for 312 years. In that time, she had commanded the conquest of 47 worlds and the subjugation of 16 intelligent species. She had watched civilizations fall and empires crumble. She had seen every form of resistance that the galaxy had to offer, from the desperate last stands of doomed armies to the quiet submission of broken peoples. Nothing surprised her anymore. Nothing interested her anymore. Conquest had become routine, a simple matter of mathematics and patience. The Valdari were more numerous than their enemies. The Valdari were more coordinated than their enemies. The Valdari were more patient than their enemies. Victory was inevitable. It was simply question of how long it would take and how many resources it would require. So, when Commander Vethrak's report arrived from the captured human vessel, Celiara almost deleted it without reading. Another ship captured, another species encountered, another routine addition to her empire's endless expansion. But something in the report's summary made her pause. Single human combatant, it read. Casualties, 34 soldiers. And behavior, unprecedented. 34 soldiers, 1 human. Celiara leaned forward on her throne, her compound eyes narrowing with something that might have been curiosity. She had not felt curious in a very long time. She commanded her attendants to bring up the visual recordings from the boarding operation, and she watched in silence as the events unfolded on the massive screen before her. She watched the human emerge from hiding and attack. Without warning, she watched him move through the ship like a force of nature, killing soldiers who outweighed him by 300 pounds, who wore armor that should have been impervious to his primitive weapons. She watched him take wound after wound and keep fighting. She watched him smile then. Smile. Celiara had studied countless species throughout her long reign, and she had learned to read their expressions and understand their emotions. Fear showed in certain ways. The widening of eyes, the trembling of limbs, the desperate flight responses that made prey so easy to capture. Despair showed in other ways. The slumping of shoulders, the emptiness in eyes, the total surrender of will that made conquest so efficient. But this human's smile showed something she had never encountered before. It showed joy. The human was experiencing joy while fighting for his life against impossible odds. He was experiencing joy while watching his world burn around him. He was experiencing joy in the simple act of resistance itself, regardless of whether that resistance could ever succeed. Celiara watched the final confrontation in the medical bay 3 times, studying every moment of the human's defiant speech to Commander Vethrak. Surrender is not victory, the human had said, and death in battle is not defeat. The words echoed in Celiara's mind long after the recording ended. She had conquered species that fought with superior technology. She had conquered species that fought with superior numbers. She had conquered species that fought with desperate courage born of fear. But she had never encountered a species that fought simply because fighting had meaning, because the act of resistance itself was considered a form of victory. This was not logical. This was not efficient. This was not anything that her 3 centuries of experience had prepared her for, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, High Queen Celiara Vethani felt a cold whisper of something that might have been Fernut. Fear of this single wounded human, not fear of what he could do to her or her empire, but fear of what he represented if one human could do this, if one human could kill 34 Valdari soldiers through nothing but determination and will. What could a planet of humans do? What could a billion of these creatures do if they fought with the same terrible joy, the same absolute refusal to accept defeat? The mathematics of conquest suddenly seemed less certain. The inevitability of victory suddenly seemed less assured. Celia rose from her throne and issued an order that made her attendants freeze in shock. "Prepare my shuttle," she said. "I am going to the captured vessel personally." "My queen," her senior advisor protested. "That is not necessary. And we can bring the prisoner here for—" "I did not ask for your opinion," Celiara interrupted, her voice cold and absolute. "I said prepare my shuttle because I will see this human myself in the place where he fought, surrounded by the evidence of what he has done." The advisor bowed and retreated, and within the hour, Celiara's shuttle was docking with the battered remains of the horizon's edge. She walked through the corridors that Marcus had turned into a killing ground, stepping over the bodies of her soldiers, studying the scorch marks and bloodstains that told the story of his desperate battle. She saw the cargo bay where he had first revealed himself. Counting the dead and imagining the chaos of those opening moments, she saw the medical bay where he had made his last stand. Noting the positions of the fallen and reconstructing the final fight in her mind. And finally, she entered the observation deck where they were holding him. Marcus was barely conscious, strapped to a medical gurney, while Valdari drones worked to keep him alive. He was a wreck of a man, broken bones, internal bleeding, burns and cuts covering almost every inch of his body by any reasonable measure. He should have been dead, but his eyes opened when she entered, and he looked directly at her with a gaze that held no fear, no submission, no acceptance of defeat. "So you are the queen," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I was wondering when you would show up." Celiara studied him for a long moment. This strange and terrible creature who had done the impossible. "You killed 34 of my soldiers," she said. "I was aiming for 50, Marcus replied. "And incredibly, impossibly," he smiled again. "But I got a little tired toward the end." "You should be dead." "Probably," he agreed. "But I decided not to die yet because I wanted to see your face first. And now that you have seen it?" Marcus's smile widened, showing teeth stained with blood. "Now I want to see if you have the courage to fight me yourself, or if you only send others to die for you." Celiara felt her antennae twitch in surprise. No one had ever challenged her directly. No prey had ever looked upon the High Queen of the Valdari Dominion and seen anything but their own death. But this human looked at her and saw an enemy, just an enemy, something that could be fought, something that could be beaten. And in that moment, Celiara made a decision that would echo through history. She turned to her guards and spoke words that had never been spoken by a Valdari queen in 300 years of conquest. "Leave us," she commanded. "I will speak with this human alone." The guards hesitated. In 300 years of service to the throne, no Valdari soldier had ever been ordered to leave their queen alone with a prisoner. The very concept was absurd. Queens were precious, irreplaceable. The living hearts of the hive mind that connected all Valorese were protected at all costs, guarded at all times, never exposed to even the smallest risk. And yet here was High Queen Celiara Vethani, standing in a room with a creature who had killed 34 of their finest warriors, ordering her guards to abandon her. "My queen," the senior guard began, "this creature is dangerous beyond—" "I am aware of what this creature is," Celiara interrupted. "I have watched the recordings of his actions, and I have walked through the corridors filled with our dead, and I understand exactly what he is capable of." "Then surely you understand why we cannot leave you." "What I understand," Celiara said, and her voice dropped to a tone that made every Valdari in the room freeze. Is that I gave you an order, and you are questioning it? And if you continue to question it, I will have you executed for insubordination. The guards bowed and retreated, their movements jerky with barely suppressed fear. The door sealed behind them, and Celiara was alone with the human Marcus. Watch this exchange with something like amusement flickering in his exhausted eyes. They really are afraid of you, he observed. They should be, Celiara replied. I have ruled this dominion for 3 centuries, and those who disobey me do not live to disobey me twice. Sounds lonely. The comment surprised her of all the things she had expected this human to say. That was not among them. Lonely? She repeated. Being so powerful that everyone around you is too scared to disagree with you, Marcus said. Too scared to tell you when you are wrong. Too scared to treat you like a real person instead of something to be worshipped or feared. He coughed, and blood flecked his lips. That sounds lonely to me. Celiara moved closer to the gurney, studying this strange creature with new interest. You are dying, she observed. Your body is failing despite my medical drone's best efforts. And yet you waste your remaining breath on observations about my emotional state? I told you before, Marcus said. I decided not to die yet. And I meant it. That is not how biology works. Maybe not for your species, he replied. But humans are stubborn that way, and we do not always do what our bodies tell us to do. Celiara considered this. Why? She asked finally, why do you fight so hard against the inevitable? Because nothing is inevitable, Marcus said. Because every moment I keep breathing is a moment I have not lost yet. And every word I speak is a word you have to hear. And what words do you want me to hear? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, gathering his strength. I want you to understand something about my species, he said finally. Something that might save both our peoples a lot of pain. Go on. You look at us and you see weak creatures, Marcus said. You see soft bodies and short lifespans and primitive technology. And you calculate that we will be easy to conquer. The calculation is sound, Celiara agreed. Your species is young and underdeveloped compared to the civilizations we have already absorbed. Maybe, Marcus said. But you are missing something important in your calculation. And that something is what you saw today. He gestured weakly at the observation window. At the stars beyond, at the vast emptiness of space. Out there is my home, he said. A small blue planet circling an ordinary star, filled with 8 billion people who have spent their entire history fighting each other over land and resources and ideas. And we have never stopped fighting because fighting is what we do. That seems inefficient. It is, Marcus agreed. It is wasteful and painful, and sometimes it seems like madness. But it has also made us into something your species has never encountered before. He looked directly into her compound eyes, and his gaze was steady despite the pain that must have been consuming him. It has made us into a species that does not know how to give up, he said. It has made us into a species that will fight you for every inch of every world, for every city and every village and every single human life. And we will keep fighting even when we are losing, even when victory seems impossible, even when logic tells us that resistance is futile. Why? Celiara asked, and the question was genuine. Why would you do this when submission would spare you so much suffering? Because suffering in freedom is better than comfort in chains, Marcus replied. Because we would rather die standing than live on our knees. And because every human who has ever lived has carried inside them a small spark of defiance that refuses to be extinguished. He smiled again, that terrible, wonderful smile that had haunted her thoughts since she first saw it in the recordings. You wanted to know why I kept fighting tonight? He asked. That is why. And every human on Earth would do the same thing because it is simply who we are. Celiara was silent for a long time. Processing his words, she thought about the mathematics of conquest. About the calculations that had seemed so certain just hours ago. She thought about what it would mean to fight a species where every individual was like this human, stubborn, defiant, willing to die rather than submit. She thought about the cost in Voldari lives, the decades or centuries of warfare, the possibility that for the first time in her long reign, a conquest might actually fail. And then she thought about something else entirely. She thought about what it would mean to have such a species as allies instead of slaves. "You have given me much to consider," she said. "Finally, good," Marcus replied. "That was the plan. The plan. I knew I could not beat your entire fleet," he admitted. "I knew I could not save my ship or my crewmates or myself. But I thought maybe, if I fought hard enough and long enough, I could make you notice me." He coughed again. "Weaker this time. I thought maybe I could make you think twice about what you were planning to do to my people." Celiaro looked at this broken, bleeding creature who had orchestrated his own capture just to deliver a message. And she felt something she had not felt in 300 years. She felt respect. "Rest now," she said, and her voice was softer than before. "I will give orders for my best medical teams to attend to you because you and I have more to discuss. Is that a promise?" Marcus asked, his eyes already closing. "It is," Celiaro replied. "And I always keep my promises." She turned and walked toward the door, her mind already racing with possibilities she had never considered before behind her. Marcus Cole slipped into unconsciousness with a small smile still on his face. He had done what he set out to do. Now it was up to the Queen to decide what came next. Marcus woke to the soft hum of alien machinery and the strange sensation of not being in pain. For a moment, he thought he was dead. Then he opened his eyes and saw the High Queen of the Voldari Dominion sitting beside his bed, watching him with those vast compound eyes that seemed to hold the light of 1,000 stars. "How long?" he asked, his voice rough but stronger than before. 6 days, Celiaro replied. "My medical teams have been working without rest to repair the damage you did to yourself." Marcus looked down at his body, wrapped in some kind of translucent membrane that pulsed with a soft blue light. "I feel better than I have in years," he admitted. "Voldari medical technology is far beyond what your species has developed." Celiaro said, "We have repaired your broken bones, regenerated your damaged organs, and eliminated several chronic conditions you were not even aware you had." "Thank you," Marcus said. And he meant it. "Do not thank me yet," Celiaro replied. "I did not heal you out of kindness. And I healed you because I need you alive for what comes next." Marcus pushed himself up to a sitting position, surprised at how easy the movement was. "And what comes next?" Celiaro rose from her seat and walked to the observation window, her tall form silhouetted against the backdrop of distant stars. "I have spent the past 6 days in communication with my advisors and commanders," she said. "I have shared the recordings of your battle with them, and I have forced them to consider the implications of what you represent. And what do I represent? A problem," Celiaro said simply. "A problem that cannot be solved through our usual methods." She turned to face him, and her expression, as alien as it was, seemed almost troubled. "For 3 centuries, I have conquered through mathematics," she explained. "We identify a species, we calculate the resources required to subjugate them. We apply those resources with patience and precision. And eventually, they submit because submission is logical. But humans do not operate on logic alone," Marcus said. "No," Celiaro agreed. "You operate on something else entirely, something my advisors cannot quantify and my commanders cannot counter." She moved closer to his bed, her movements graceful despite her massive size. "I have studied your species since our first scouts discovered your solar system," she said. "I have read your histories, watched your entertainments, analyzed your wars and your politics and your religions. And I thought I understood you, but you did not. No, she admitted. I understood your bodies and your technology and your social structures. But I did not understand the fire that burns inside you, the fire that made you smile while fighting impossible odds. The fire that made you keep standing when any rational creature would have fallen. She sat down on the edge of his bed. And Marcus realized with shock that this was an act of trust. A queen making herself vulnerable to someone who had killed dozens of her soldiers. My species evolved as a collective, Celiara said. We draw our strength from our connection to the hive, from our unity of purpose and thought. And when that connection is strong, we are unstoppable. But we have also become predictable, she admitted. We've become rigid in our thinking, efficient but uncreative. Powerful but brittle in ways I'm only now beginning to understand. She looked at him with those strange, beautiful eyes. You possess something we have lost, or perhaps something we never had, she said. You possess the ability to find strength within yourself. To keep fighting when everything external tells you to stop. To draw fire from nothing but your own will. It is called being human, Marcus said with a small smile. Yes, Celiara agreed. And it is something my people need to learn. Marcus stared at her, trying to understand what she was saying. You want to learn from us? He asked. The species you came here to conquer? I want more than that, Celiara said. I want an alliance. The word hung in the air between them. Impossible and yet somehow inevitable. An alliance, Marcus repeated. The Voldari Dominion will halt its advance toward your solar system, Celiara said. We will withdraw our fleets and cancel our plans for conquest, and in exchange, humanity will send ambassadors to my court to teach us what you know. What we know about what? About individuality, Celiara said. About finding purpose beyond the collective. About that fire that burns inside you, even when everything seems lost. She reached out and touched his hand. Her chitinous fingers surprisingly gentle. I have ruled for 3 centuries, she said. I have conquered worlds and crushed empires and built a dominion that spanned star systems. But I have never felt alive the way you seemed alive in those recordings. Her voice dropped to something almost like a whisper. I have never felt joy. Marcus looked at this ancient, powerful queen who controlled more military might than all of human history combined. And he saw something he had not expected. To see, he saw loneliness, he saw hunger, he saw a creature who had everything except the one thing that mattered, the ability to find meaning in existence itself. I am just soldier, he said quietly. I am not a diplomat or a philosopher, and I do not know if I can teach you anything worth learning. You already have, Celiara replied. In one night, you taught me more about the nature of existence than 3 centuries of conquest ever did. She stood and extended her hand toward him in a gesture that was unmistakably human, a gesture she must have learned from studying Earth's cultures. Come with me, she said. Be the first bridge between our peoples, and help me build something greater than either of us could achieve alone. Marcus looked at her hand, then at the stars beyond the observation window. Then, back at her face, he thought about his crewmates who had died on the horizon's edge. He thought about Earth, distant and unaware of how close it had come to destruction. He thought about all the things he had fought for and all the things he had lost, and then he reached out and took the Queen's hand. You have yourself a deal. Your Majesty. Celiara's mandibles shifted into something that might have been a smile. Then let us begin, she said. Let us show the galaxy what happens when the fire of humanity joins with the patience of the Voldari. She helped him to his feet, and together they walked toward the door behind them through the observation window. The stars seemed to shine a little brighter. The conquest was over. Something new was about to begin. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, a small blue planet called Earth spun peacefully in its orbit. Completely unaware that one stubborn soldier had just changed the fate of two civilizations, Marcus Cole had set out to make the Queen think twice. He had ended up making her think differently, and in the end, that made all the difference in the universe.